Good afternoon. Welcome to Cool Springs. Today is Wednesday, May the 13th, 2026, and this is our series on the book Song of Solomon. And today we're looking at chapters 3 and 4, which is the wedding ceremony, the wedding processional, the wedding feast, which would last for a week, and the honeymoon, when the bride and the groom get to actually consummate their marriage. In chapters 1 and 2, there's the attraction and the longing for physical intimacy, but they need to wait until they are properly married to actually enjoy that physical relationship. And so, chapter 3 today, I want you to know that it's the bride speaking throughout chapter 3. When we get to chapter 4, verses 1 through 14 is going to be the groom speaking, and then verse 15 is the bride speaking. So, what little we know about Jewish wedding customs come from the Song of Solomon and from some questions that people ask Jesus in the New Testament about marriage, who should be married, what's the purpose of marriage. We know a lot about the customs today from historical records, but biblically, Song of Solomon actually gives us a very good look at what the Jewish wedding custom was like. It's not a coincidence that when Jesus is asked about the kingdom of heaven, as he frequently was during his public ministry, he keeps going back to the idea of the Jewish wedding, because his audience would have been all Jewish and they would have immediately understood and known what the customs were, whereas people reading it centuries after the New Testament in various cultures around the world, where each culture has its own idea of marriage and ceremonies and what should go on and what should not go on. Everybody's reading some of their own culture into it. There are some important things about the wedding and about the relationship that God seeks to have with mankind. In the Jewish world, when a couple became betrothed and engaged, the guy's responsibility was to go back to his father's house and prepare a place for them to live as a couple and to raise their children in if they're going to have children. So a lot of times in the New Testament, when Jesus is talking to his followers and he's saying, I'm going to prepare a place for you, and if I go to prepare a place for you, I'm going to come back and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you can be. They all understood it because they understood the Jewish wedding custom. The groom's responsibility, once he had presented the contract to the bride, saying, these are the things that I as the groom will do for you, how I will provide and take care of you. Once she agrees to that relationship, what he would do is he would pour a cup of wine and set it before her after he's made the arrangements with her father or whoever her male protector or family member is. And once they've agreed on a bride price, the contract is presented to the girl. And she has sole authority to say yes or to say no. If she says no, the groom takes his prospective contract and the cup of wine and he leaves and he's not coming back. But if she says yes, the way she agrees to it is she reaches for and takes from the cup. She takes a sip of the wine. They are bound together in the eyes of the law at that moment in time. He leaves to prepare a place for her under the supervision of his father. Her responsibility is now to wait, to be prepared for whenever the day comes when the groom's father says, you have prepared a proper place for you and your bride to dwell. Now you may go and claim your bride. And the groom would come usually at night and usually with a great procession, making noise and friends coming along so that everybody knows the groom is coming and he's coming to claim his bride. And not only is he going to claim the bride, but the bride's attendants and friends and family members are going to follow along, and they're all going to go off to the groom's house to celebrate the feast. The bride and the groom will have their honeymoon right there, and the party will last for a week. And The couple reemerges in public together now as husband and wife, and everybody's celebrating for a week. And part of our reason for having Song of Solomon in the Bible, like I said when we introduced the course, the scribe Ezra and some of the other priests and scribes, religious leaders who came back from the Babylonian exile, looked at what books existed at that time to decide which ones needed to be considered scripture, canon, to be taught in the synagogues and proclaimed to the people as the Word of God. Well, obviously they knew the 5 books of Moses, where God gave Moses all the information that we have recorded in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy while he's up on the mountain receiving the 10 Commandments. He gets the information and he comes back with that. Obviously, that's God's Word. But then out of all the other books that exist from that time forward, they have to decide which ones belong in the Scriptures. And so the Jewish community coming back from exile came up with the law, with the prophetic books, including books like Samuel's considered a prophetic book, certainly Daniel, Hosea, Isaiah, those kinds of folks, but also the writings that would include Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon was included. And so here in chapter 3, my little title, because remember I'm using my precept notebook, which has the scripture text printed out and gives space for you to write your own notes out to the side. My chapter theme for chapter 3 is the wedding procession. And then for chapter 4, it's the wedding night. I could have said the honeymoon because it's the bride and the groom finally having the ability to be together, to experience the intimacy that a married couple experiences when they celebrate their love physically, because now it's the right and proper time. Before, when they were courting each other, they needed to practice restraint. But now it is perfectly right and normal and good for them to appreciate each other, to celebrate being together, and to experience the joy that you can only experience when you intimately know another person the way a husband and wife will know each other. So in chapter 3, it's the bride describing what happens. She's been waiting. She's had her moments of, why would somebody like Solomon, rich, powerful king, choose somebody like me, a girl who's out there working in the vineyards? And she's had those right kinds of friends that reaffirmed her and reassured her in her doubts about herself, saying, no, 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 you are lovely. No, 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 you do deserve love. A lot of times it's important to have people in your life who value you, who can tell you the truth that you need to hear, but who love you enough to tell you sometimes an unpleasant truth, and they are going to care for you no matter what, and they're going to see the qualities in you that maybe you've been intimidated or feeling like you're less than whole, that you're damaged goods some kind of way. You need people in your life who see the goodness in you, who see the value in you, because God sees you as somebody valuable. Yeah, we're all sinners. Yeah, we all fall short of God's grace. We all mess up. Sometimes we do things to hurt people unintentionally. Sometimes we do things to hurt people intentionally. God sees us with all of our flaws, and He loved us enough to come and take on flesh and live the sinless life and substitute His sinless life for our sinful one by paying our sin penalty on the cross. God loves you. No matter what flaws or faults you think you have, God still loved you enough to die for you. And so our bride here, the Shunammite girl, somebody from Jerusalem, working class, had to work for a living. That's why she was suntanned, because she had to work. She's thinking that, oh, I'm not as valuable as those rich girls from wealthy families who don't have to work, who have servants to do everything. No, no, no. You're valuable in your own right, and you deserve love. You're worthy of your groom's love. You're worthy of God's love, and that's a message everybody needs to hear. So now the bride is describing the wedding processional. Solomon has prepared a place for his bride, and he's coming to get her and take her back, and she's no longer going to be the working peasant girl. She's going to become part of the royal family, the royal household. She's going to become the bride of the king. On my bed, night after night, I sought him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but did not find him. I must arise now and go about the city, in the streets and in the squares. I must seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but I didn't find him. The watchmen who make the rounds of the city found me, and I said, have you seen him whom my soul loves? Scarcely had I left them when I found him whom my soul loves. I held on to him and would not let him go, until I'd brought him to my mother's house and into the room of her who conceived me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the hinds of the field, that you will not arouse or awaken my love until she pleases. What is this coming up from the wilderness like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all scented powders of the merchant? Behold, it is the traveling couch of Solomon. 60 mighty men surround it, of the mighty men of Israel. The bride's talking here, and she's been yearning for that day. She's waiting, and waiting is tough for anybody when there's something you're anticipating and you're looking forward to. Waiting is very, very tough to deal with. She's been waiting. She's yearning to be with him. She wants it so badly. And now the day's finally arrived. Verse 6 there. What is this coming up from the wilderness like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense? And remember, myrrh and frankincense were used because deodorant has not been invented yet. They would put pouches that they would hang like a necklace on their neck and into their chest area, because there's not a lot of water, so they can't take daily showers or even take immersion type baths. They can't use deodorant because it hasn't been invented yet. Perfume will only mask body odors for a certain amount of time, and then the perfume plus the body sweat makes a very unpleasant smell. So they're using these fragrances to make themselves as presentable as possible. Behold, it's the traveling coach of Solomon. Since 60 mighty men surround it, of the mighty men of Israel. All of them are wielders of the sword, expert in war. Each man has his sword at his side, guarding against the terrors of the night. King Solomon has made for himself a sedan chair from the timber of Lebanon. He made its post of silver, its back of gold, and its seat of purple fabric, with its interior lovingly fitted out by the daughters of Jerusalem. That traveling sedan. The modern word for that is an Empyrean. You've probably seen in movies, like if you saw, for example, Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments, there's a scene in there where Bithia and Nefertiri, Bithia is Moses' adoptive mother, and Nefertiri is the one who's supposedly going to be the bride of the next Pharaoh, and she's interested in Moses, not in Ramesses. And they've had a conversation, and Bithia lets Nefertiri know Moses has gone to be with his people, and so Nefertiri is being carried by these men, these strong men who have this chair that has a hood over it and long poles, and she sees Moses out there in the mud, living like a slave now, and she wants him to notice her. That was an Empyrean. In the Jewish world, even now, a lot of times at wedding feast, at the reception afterwards, you'll see people lifting both the bride and the groom up in chairs, and they're dancing around wherever the reception's being held. That chair is the remnant of the idea of the period, of the chariot, that in this case a wealthy groom like Solomon would be able to provide, to send for his bride, for her to be lifted up and carried from her former home now into the Father's house, into the palace where she's going to dwell with her husband. And so they have this idea of bringing the bride in a chariot, and Solomon has provided his strongest, best warriors to protect his bride from anybody who might seek to interfere with the procession or to do them harm. She's being carried in this very, very well-appointed chariot that has silver and gold, and she's being lifted high up and honored and carried off to the place where the wedding is going to take place, to the groom's house. Go forth, O daughters of Zion, and gaze on King Solomon with the crown with which his mother has crowned him on the day of his wedding and on the day of his gladness of heart. So the groom has showed up to claim his bride, just like any Jewish man would show up when his father said, you've prepared a proper place, and now you can go and claim your bride. Groom and bride never knew when their wedding day was going to be. It was the Father who determined it. And that's why when Jesus, answering people's questions about the kingdom, talks about no one knows the day or the hour, not even the Son, but the Father. He's reminding his Jewish audience of the Jewish wedding customs, that whenever the day comes where God the Father tells Jesus, now it's time to go and claim your bride, that is when he returns to claim his church, and we go to be where he is. We go to dwell with him. We're seeing this practically lived out in the 900s BC, which is when Solomon would have been living and would have married this girl. He's come with his groomsmen. He's come with a well-appointed chariot. And she's about to go from just being a girl in the village to now she's the wife of the king. And so they go to chapter 4, which is they're going back to the palace. The bride and groom are going to consummate the marriage. The party is going to go on where people will be there celebrating with them over the fact that they have joined their lives to each other and they can now experience the joys of love and married life. So chapter 4 is basically the wedding night. And as we read through this, you're going to discover that the bride and the groom are being very complimentary to each other. In fact, the groom is going to go head to toe describing everything that's pleasing about this girl that he is now allowed to be with, that he can now show physical, intimate love to. How beautiful you are, my darling. How beautiful you are. Your eyes are like doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats that have descended from Mount Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of newly shorn ewes, those would be lambs, which have come up from their washing, all of which bear twins, and not one among them has lost her young. Your lips are like a scarlet thread, and your mouth is lovely. Remember, we talked in last week's session about how the bride and the groom, when they're courting each other and they're complimenting each other, they're using real compliments, real things that they admire about each other, but they're using the symbolism of fragrances and plants and animals. Because in last week's, the groom described the bride as being like a mare. Well, we hear that in our 21st century ears, and we're like, he just said she's like a horse? We don't think of that as complimentary. But in his day and time, the horse was a symbol not only of a beautiful animal, but of someone who had strength and power. And so it's a very complimentary thing in his culture to say that. And you're going to see that repeated here in chapter 4 as they are describing each other and celebrating the love. The fact that he talks about the fact that her teeth are like a flock of newly shorn ewes. For her to have all of her teeth and for them to be gleaming white, that's a beautiful thing. They don't have dentists this far back in BC times. If you had any sort of problem with your teeth, there was one solution. Yank it out. So to be an adult, even a young adult, she's probably about 14 to 17 years of age, marriageable age for a girl in that day and time. To have all of your teeth was something to admire and compliment, because by the time they're in the 20s and the 30s, men and women alike have lost a lot of their teeth. And he's describing her, and he's describing everything he finds beautiful about her. Verse 3, your lips are like a scarlet thread, and your mouth is lovely. Your temples are like a slice of a pomegranate behind your veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with rows of stones on which are hung 1,000 shields, all the round shields of the mighty men. Your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle, which feed among the lilies until the cool of the day. If you've been married, you may remember your wedding night. You may remember sometimes feeling a little bit anxious because the first time you're together with your beloved and you're seeing each other, you want to please each other, but you also want to make sure that everything about you is pleasing to your groom. He's reassuring her that every part of her body he finds lovely, and it's okay. In fact, it's right and proper for a husband and wife to enjoy being together sexually, to be united, to celebrate their physical features and their physical intimacy, because that physical intimacy is going to lead to a spiritual intimacy as a couple. So he's describing her breasts like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. A gazelle would be an animal that they would admire not only for its beauty, but for its ability to leap about among the hilly terrain, the mountains, which feed among the lilies until the cool of the day when the shadows flee away. I will go my way to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense. You are altogether beautiful, my darling, and there is no blemish in you. This bride would have cheerfully received her husband's compliments now that she's being with him for the first time and that he finds everything about her to be pleasing. Because remember, early on, she was suntanned because she was a working class person, and she had doubts that somebody as rich and powerful and famous as him would take notice of somebody like her. But he has taken notice. The relationship is deepened. He has claimed her as his very own bride, and now she gets to celebrate being with him and experiencing his love. All throughout it, she keeps saying, him whom my soul loves, because she's given him her whole heart. As we're going to see, the kind of a dark cloud that hangs over this celebration of love and marital relationships is that she has given Solomon her whole heart. He has only given her part of his. At the time that he marries her, he already has at least 60 other queens, women he's elevated to the status of a wife, and 80 concubines, women who he's allowed to enjoy for his pleasure, but whom he does not give the status of wife to. He has a divided heart. She has an undivided heart towards him. Her way of approaching marriage is the way that God intended. God did not intend for Adam to have Eve and Susan and Jenny and Nancy and Eleanor and whoever else. God intended for Adam and Eve to be husband and wife. Yes, there were times in biblical times when men practiced having multiple wives and having concubines as well. Don't mistake what is tolerated, permitted, with what is preferred, with God's perfect will. God's perfect will was for one man and one woman to be together. As we know, again, we go to the New Testament, when Jesus is talking about marriage and he's being asked questions about marriage and divorce, and he's telling the people who are asking him the questions, you've misunderstood what marriage is about, that it's not okay for a man to divorce his wife for any reason. That was the question that he was asked. But that from the beginning, Moses permitted, tolerated it out of the hardness of your hearts in the case of infidelity. But that God's design from the beginning was that one man would be with one woman and they would become one flesh, united as one family unit, and that the man would leave his mother's and father's home and cling to his wife. That was Jesus talking on marriage, and he's the ultimate authority source for us on what marriage is supposed to be. So here now in chapter 4, as Solomon is complimenting his bride, as they are on their honeymoon, as they are experiencing marital physical contact for the first time. Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. May you come with me from Lebanon. Journey down from the summit of Amana, from the summit of Senir and Hermon, from the dens of lions, from the mountains of the leopards. You have made my heart beat faster, my sister, my bride. He's complimenting her and he's saying, you're part of my family. And he's also let her know, baby, you take my breath away. You've made my heart beat faster. She would need that kind of love and assurance that he finds her as attractive as she finds him. And that within the context of marriage, it's okay for a husband and wife to enjoy each other. You have made my heart beat faster, my sister, my bride. You've made my heart beat faster with a single glance of your eyes, with a single strand of your necklace. How beautiful is your love, my sister, my bride. It's not that she is related to him biologically. It's a case of she's now part of the family. He wants to take care of her, just as a man would want to take care of his mama and his sisters in the absence of a father to do so. He wants to take care of his bride, and he's saying, you're part of who I am now. You're part of my family. The idea of flesh of my flesh, bone of my bones, which goes all the way back to Adam. When God presents Eve to Adam in the Garden of Eden, Adam's response is, at last, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. He recognized that they are to be related to each other in a very special, intimate way, that even though he could have relationships with the rest of God's creation, that there was something different and special and, yes, holy about a husband and a wife being together and loving each other intimately, loving each other physically as well as loving each other spiritually. How beautiful is your love, my sister, my bride. How much better is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your oils than all kinds of spices. Your lips, my bride, drip honey. Honey and milk are under your tongue, and the fragrance of your garments is like the fragrance of Lebanon. A garden locked is my sister, my bride. A rock garden locked, a spring sealed up. Your shoots are like an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits, henna and nard plants, nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with all the trees of frankincense, myrrh and aloes, along with the finest spices. You are a garden spring, a well of fresh water, and streams flowing from Lebanon. Awake, north wind, and come, wind of the south. Make my garden breathe out fragrance. Let its spices be wafted abroad. May my beloved come into his garden and eat its choicest fruits. That's a very symbolic and, graphic description of, okay, she's kept herself chaste. No one else has been with her. She has remained pure, ready now to fully give herself to her groom. And it's all right for the groom. Verse 16 there is the bride responding back saying, yes, I'm all yours. It's okay for them to be together because they are married. They are now consummating that marriage. They are experiencing the sexual love of a husband and wife together for the first time. So chapters 3 and 4, I'll have the camera operator turn to the board for just a second there. Chapters 1 and 2 dealt with the courtship, with the fact that they were complimenting each other, that he had to reassure her, and so did her friends, that she was worthy of the right kind of love, that she deserved to have this kind of a relationship, that she has physical beauty, but she also has the beauty of character. And now today, in chapters 3 and 4, we've looked at the wedding feast, the honeymoon, as they have consummated that union. Next week, when we look at 5 and 6, we're going to discover that they're going to be living married life. And I'll have you bring the camera back to me now. They're going to be, they're going to be living together. And she now belongs to the royal household. And she's still wholeheartedly devoted to him. But because he has other wives and other concubines, and he's going to take even more after this one, his heart's not going to be wholly devoted to her. And she's going to be yearning for him and longing for him and going out and seeking him. She has to deal with the fact that she has a husband who isn't fully devoted to her as she is to him. They're going to have some rough spots in their relationship. Couples do that. The honeymoon's great. You come home from the honeymoon, you start doing the day-to-day living with each other, and you're not off on the honeymoon and having the holiday time. Now you're back, and daily life rears up and happens, and you discover that there are things about your beloved that you don't find so lovely. That they may have habits that get under your skin. You didn't notice it beforehand when you weren't living under the same roof, but now you're having to deal with the day-to-day business of living. And the honeymoon fades, and you start to have disagreements and arguments, and you have to figure out how to reconcile with each other. Chapters 5 and 6 that we're going to be looking at next week will deal with something's happened in their relationship that's caused some emotional separation. And he can go out and fulfill his physical desires with other women. She still has to be solely his, but the connection is there, and they want to reconcile and make things right, just like husbands and wives make up after they've had disagreements over things. And so next week we're going to look at married life as it starts to get real, with the life issues that come up and with the things that tend to want to separate lovers from each other, and how they find their way back to each other, how they reconcile, how they learn to forgive and be forgiven, to care, to show love, to adjust to the fact that, hey, it's not just all about me, the other person has needs. See you next week for chapters 5 and 6. Thanks for watching.